Imagine opening the door of a little French country cottage, where sunlight spills across worn wooden floors and the air feels wrapped in linen and lavender. The walls are soft cream, the furniture is gently worn, and every corner tells a story of seasons come and gone. This is the heart of vintage cottage decor, not a perfectly staged catalog shot, but a home that breathes, remembers, and invites you to stay a little longer. Picture the sofa upholstered in faded floral linen, a knit blanket casually folded at one end, and a stack of old books on the coffee table. A single vase of dried herbs sits on the sill, catching the afternoon glow, while sheer curtains flutter in a soft breeze. The space feels both nostalgic and alive, welcoming you to sit, to slow down, to let the outside world fade behind these gentle walls. If you're a fan of timeless charm, antiques, and homes that feel full of soul, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Vintage Touch Decor with Soul, hit the like button if this cozy French country vibe speaks to you, and share in the comments what room you'd love to transform into a dreamy vintage cottage. Let's begin our journey together. French country design feels like a sun-drenched farmhouse in Provence, where every object has been touched by time and use. Walls are softly painted in creamy whites, worn wooden floors bear the gentle marks of generations, and simple furniture tells quiet stories of meals shared and evenings spent together. Picture large wooden beams overhead, a heavy farmhouse table at the center of the room, and linen curtains filtering the afternoon light. A stone or brick fireplace glows softly, framed by a carved mantel dotted with vintage ceramics and a small bouquet of wildflowers. As you imagine bringing this spirit into your own home, think of French country as a gentle philosophy. Choose pieces with character, embrace imperfections, and let warmth guide your choices. A vintage cottage draws you in the moment your eyes rest on its floors and walls, where every groove and imperfection carries a hint of that lived-in story. Imagine soft, pale wood planks worn smooth by time, their surface catching the daylight like a whispered secret, paired with walls in the gentlest cream or warm beige. Add a touch of shiplap or softly textured plaster, and the room begins to feel like a quiet retreat from the world outside. A faded rag rug or a simple linen runner lies along the floor, grounding the space with soft texture and muted color. If you're dreaming of a French country cottage, begin with these foundations: floors that feel warm underfoot and walls that glow softly in the light. In a French country vintage cottage, the walls are less like a backdrop and more like a quiet companion to daily life. Imagine soft, whisper-quiet walls in creamy whites, faded sage greens, or barely there blues, each hue absorbing the daylight and reflecting it back in a gentle glow. Weave in a touch of vintage wallpaper, faded toile, delicate florals, or tiny stripes behind glass cabinet doors or along a hallway, and the space begins to feel like a curated memory. The pattern repeats softly, never overwhelming, just enough to suggest a long history of après-midi teas and slow Sunday mornings. If you're ready to transform your space, think of paint and wallpaper as the first brushstrokes of your story. In a dreamy French country vintage cottage, the furniture never feels like it just arrived from a showroom. It looks like it has always belonged. Imagine a soft gray or cream-painted farmhouse table at the center of the room, its surface gently worn from years of meals, coffee cups, and handwritten letters. Lean a weathered armchair near the window, upholstered in faded floral linen or a soft checkered fabric, its wooden frame slightly uneven but full of character. When you're choosing furniture for your vintage cottage, look for pieces that feel lived in rather than perfectly pristine. In a soft cinematic cottagecore French country home, textiles are where the room begins to breathe and feel truly alive. Imagine a sofa draped in large faded linen cushions in creamy whites and soft grays, their corners slightly uneven and fabric lightly wrinkled, as if they've been loved and folded 1,000 times. Picture the windows dressed in sheer linen curtains that float like whispers in the breeze, filtering the sunlight into a gentle, hazy glow across the wooden floor. A braided jute or vintage-style rag rug adds subtle texture underfoot, grounding the space without stealing attention. When you style your vintage cottage, think of textiles as the quiet heartbeat of the room: linen, wool, cotton, and knits that feel good against the skin and look better with age. In a dreamy French country vintage cottage, flowers aren't just decoration, they're soft punctuation marks in the story of the room. Imagine a simple ceramic pitcher filled with wild roses, lavender, and sprigs of eucalyptus, sitting on a worn wooden table where the light catches each petal like a whispered secret. Picture a small cluster of dried herbs hanging near the kitchen window, a vintage enamel jug overflowing with sunflowers on the sideboard, and a few scattered peonies resting on an open book near the sofa. As you add floral and farmhouse touches to your own space, think of them as fleeting moments made visible, soft, natural, and unhurried. In a French country vintage cottage, the kitchen feels less like a workspace and more like a warm, inviting heart that gently pulses through the house. Imagine a farmhouse table standing proudly in the center, its surface softly worn and dusted with a hint of flour, the legs slightly uneven but full of character. Picture open wooden shelves lined with hand-painted ceramic bowls, stoneware pitchers, and a few enamel pieces that catch the light like a soft glow. A vintage breadboard leans against the wall, a small jar of dried herbs sits on the sill, and a bouquet of wildflowers spills from a simple ceramic jug on the countertop. If you're dreaming of a French country cottage kitchen, focus on warmth, texture, and a little imperfection, rustic wood, handmade ceramics, and details that feel lived in. In a dreamy French country vintage cottage, the bedroom feels like the gentlest pause in a long, beautiful day, a place where time slows and worries soften. Imagine a simple wooden bed frame painted in soft cream or faded gray, its surface slightly worn and its edges rounded by years of quiet mornings and slow evenings. Picture a small nightstand holding a vintage brass lamp, a stack of old books, and a ceramic vase with a single dried rose or sprig of eucalyptus. Sheer linen curtains frame the window, their edges catching the morning light like a soft halo, while a small woven rug lies beside the bed, grounding the space with warmth and texture. When you create your cottagecore bedroom sanctuary, think less about perfection and more about comfort, linen that wrinkles, wood that shows its age, and details that feel quietly personal. In a dreamy French country vintage cottage, light isn't just illumination, it's the quiet music that shapes the mood of every room. Imagine a soft golden glow spilling through sheer linen curtains in the late afternoon, casting long, gentle shadows across the wooden floor and painting the walls in honeyed warmth. As dusk settles, a few candles appear like tiny stars across the cottage, their flames anchored in vintage ceramic holders, glass jars, or simple iron candlesticks. Picture a small cluster on the mantel, one by the kitchen sill, another beside the bed, each flicker dancing softly against the linen and wood. When you design your cottagecore home, let light guide your evenings. Mix warm-toned bulbs, soft pendants, and the gentle flare of candles to create a layered, cinematic glow. In a dreamy French country vintage cottage, the magic often lives in the smallest details, objects that feel almost too humble, yet too beautiful to ignore. Imagine a small stack of vintage cookbooks on a wooden shelf, their spines softened by time, sitting beside a hand-painted ceramic bowl filled with dried lavender. Picture a small open shelf by the window, dressed with a few mismatched cups, a vintage teapot, and a tiny potted geranium, each item catching a sliver of light as if it's quietly taking its turn to shine. As you style your own cottagecore space, treat these little touches like love notes scattered throughout the rooms, simple, personal, and meaningful. As we close this dreamy journey through French country vintage cottage decor, imagine stepping into your own cottage one quiet evening, where every wall, every chair, and every flickering candle feels like a warm embrace. The linen is soft beneath your fingers, the wood grain tells its story, and the air carries the faint scent of lavender and old books. This is a home that doesn't rush you, but sits with you, letting you breathe a little deeper and live a little slower. If you felt drawn to this soft, cinematic cottagecore world, know that your version of this dream can begin with just one small change: a piece of vintage furniture, a linen pillow, a cluster of candles, or a vase of wildflowers. These choices are not just decor, they're tiny acts of love for the space you call home and the life you want to live inside it. If this video has inspired you to create a dreamy vintage cottage home with French country decor, please subscribe to Vintage Touch Decor with Soul. Like this video, and share in the comments your favorite part of this cottagecore journey: vintage furniture, linen layers, soft lighting, or delicate floral details. Together, let's keep turning houses into homes filled with warmth and soul.